Hi Year 12s. Today we're going to be looking at cell metabolism. This PowerPoint is going to be split across two different videos. The first one's going to be looking at purely just cell metabolism, and the second video is going to be looking at the factors that could affect cell metabolism in our bodies. As per usual, there's a need to know on our first page here with all of these SACE understandings. I'm not going to go through these on this slide, so if you want to note these down in your book to make sure you're covering everything that needs to be covered, this would be a good time to pause the video and write those down. They won't be in the second video, so these need to know cover both the first and the second videos that will be presented this week. First thing we're going to do is talk about metabolism and metabolic pathways. We've talked about metabolism before, and you should know from stage 1 biology that metabolism is just the sum of all biochemical reactions that occur inside of an organism. Now, truthfully, and we talked about this again when we talked about photosynthesis and respiration, most biochemical reactions occur in metabolic pathways, so in very small organized steps rather than one big reaction. So photosynthesis isn't just carbon dioxide and water gives us glucose and oxygen. There's actually a lot more smaller steps to that. It's more complicated and lots of small organized steps. What's the reason for us doing it in such small little steps? Well, metabolic pathways have a lot of benefits, such as when you do it in smaller organized steps, the cell has greater control of the reaction. So it can decide, do we have enough of this substance? Can we go on to this step? It's not just, right, we're started, we're stuck going through with it. It can go through each small step in different stages, and it can control at what rate it goes through them. It also allows for other substrates to be fed in at different points in the pathway, so we don't need to say, right, we need all of this right now, let's go. We can say, right, well, we've got half of this now, let's start, and by the time we get up to that step, we'll have the rest of those chemicals needed. Some steps in the entire metabolic pathways will produce intermediate products. Now, those intermediate products can actually be used in different parts of the cell, so they're going to help build up other molecules. And lastly, the cell releases energy more gradually, so it doesn't need all of the energy to start. So we're essentially reducing the activation energy by doing it in smaller steps. We'll talk about these again in a future slide, but these are just the outline of the benefits of having metabolism in small organized steps, such as metabolic pathways. First off, looking purely at aerobic respiration, we know that the aerobic respiration occurs inside of the mitochondria. One of your standards now states that you need to know the different parts of the mitochondria and how they actually help aerobic respiration. So we'll split that into a table, and we're going to focus on the outer membrane, the inner membrane, the cristae, and the matrix, all of which you can see on the diagram on the left. So first off, we're going to start with the outer membrane, which is this membrane here on the outside, which is the outer membrane of the entire mitochondria. Just like a normal cell membrane, the mitochondria's membrane is made up of a lipid bilayer, and that lipid bilayer actually contains carrier and channel proteins that are going to help molecules enter the cell and exit the cell. There's also some enzymes that are embedded within the outer membrane that will just help speed up some processes. The inner membrane, this folded up membrane here. The inner membrane, again, lipid bilayer, it's our second layer of the bilayer, and it's containing enzymes that help carry out the last two stages of aerobic respiration. So that's the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, remembering that glycolysis actually happens outside of the mitochondria. So it's only the last two stages of aerobic respiration that happens inside the mitochondria. And we also have the cristae, which we've got these folded up little parts here. The cristae are almost just extensions of the inner membrane. And the whole purpose of those cristae is to increase the surface area to volume ratio of the inner membrane, which therefore is going to help increase the amount of ATP that's produced by the mitochondria. We also have the matrix, which is the blue part in the diagram here, which is basically the space inside the inner membrane. And the whole point of this is that it contains mitochondrial DNA, ribosomes, and enzymes, and most of our important chemical reactions are actually going to take place inside of that matrix. We also need to look at photosynthesis. So we know that photosynthesis takes place in the chloroplast, but again, there's different parts of the chloroplast that you need to know. So just like the mitochondria, there is an inner and outer membrane. And again, the inner and outer membrane are going to help the chloroplast move and regulate the movement of different materials in and out of the chloroplasts. Apologies, the table here says cell, it should be mitochondria. We also have the thylakoid, which is a group of membrane-bound sacs. Thylakoids here. Okay. Membrane-bound sacs that all contain the light-absorbing pigments and enzymes, which are going to help with photosynthesis. We also have our granums, which is basically, so a thylakoid is just one of them. A granum is a group of, or basically a stack of those thylakoids. Again, the main purpose for those is to increase the surface area to volume ratio of those photosynthetic pigments. We also have the stroma, which is our fluid. It's almost a gel-like fluid, and that contains enzymes. Those enzymes are going to help carry out the chemical reactions that are part of photosynthesis. Lastly, you have the stromal lamellae, which is called lamellae in the diagram. And these are just extensions of the thylakoid membranes. So you can see here this extension sticking out. Again, to help increase the surface area to volume ratio, which will help increase the rate of photosynthesis. Just a little bit more on that first slide. What's the importance of regulating metabolic pathways? Well, metabolic pathways, as we said before, there are a series of chemical reactions all controlled by specific enzymes. So each step in a metabolic pathway is regulated by its own specific enzyme. By using those small regulated steps, we can ensure that the right amount of energy is used at each step, which means we're not going to waste energy, or we're not going to get halfway through and determine we don't have enough energy to push the entire reaction going through. If we use the incorrect amount of energy at each step, we could inhibit or reduce the activity of enzymes, which is not what we want. Again, because each step is carried out in a regulated way, the energy is going to be reduced because those processes are carried out in smaller steps. It's think of it almost like going on holiday. You could go online and pay for the flights, the accommodation, everything now, and you might not be able to afford the whole thing. But if you definitely know you want to go and you know what dates you want to go, you could start by, alright, I'm going to go book the hotel now, and that way I know I have the hotel. Or I'm going for an event, I'm going to go buy tickets to this concert now, that way I've got the tickets to the concert. I don't need to have the whole money, but I can use each step to make sure I'm getting there the whole way. So obviously heat is a byproduct of chemical reactions. By doing it in smaller steps, we're ensuring that we're not having a large burst of heat being released into the cell, which could cause damage to the enzymes, causing them to denature. Lastly, one last advantage is the byproducts, like I said before, the intermediate products that are created in between each of the steps. These can be used in the body elsewhere, which means we are actually doing more than one task at once to help the body out.